The winter wind howls through broken windows, sweeping across floors once polished to a mirror shine. Water drips from a ceiling that once gleamed with 29,000 carefully placed tiles. This is Michigan Central Station in the year 2005, a monument to ambition now surrendered to decay. But to understand how this palace became a ruin, we must travel back to a time when railroad barons ruled America, and one family's vision would reshape the destiny of an entire city. The year is 1877. In New York City, a man known simply as the Commodore has just died. Cornelius Vanderbilt, the wealthiest person in the United States, leaves behind a fortune worth over $100 million. More importantly, he leaves behind a railroad empire that stretches across the eastern United States like a steel web. His son, William Henry Vanderbilt, inherits not just money but an obsession with connecting the nation by rail. William Henry had spent his early life trying to prove himself to a father who called him a blockhead and doubted his abilities. But when given the chance to manage a small, failing railroad in 1857, he transformed it into a profitable enterprise. Now, with his father's empire in his hands, William Henry turns his eyes westward toward the growing industrial heart of America. His target is Detroit, Michigan, and the vital connection it offers to Chicago. The Michigan Central Railroad was no newcomer to the region. It traced its origins back to 1832, when the Detroit and St. Joseph Railroad was chartered during Michigan's territorial days. By 1846, Boston financiers had reorganized it into the Michigan Central Railroad, purchasing the Central Line from the state of Michigan itself. The railroad grew slowly but steadily, building branch lines across Michigan, connecting small towns to the wider world. But William Henry Vanderbilt saw something more. He understood that whoever controlled the route from New York to Chicago would control the future of American commerce. The Michigan Central offered a direct path through southern Ontario via the Canada Southern Railway. In 1878, after years of careful stock purchases and strategic negotiations, the Vanderbilt family finally secured control of the Michigan Central Railroad. The takeover was completed with characteristic Vanderbilt efficiency. A shareholder meeting in Detroit saw proxies counted for hours, with 833 shareholders having their votes tallied one by one. When William Henry Vanderbilt and his entourage arrived in Detroit to inspect their new acquisition, they made promises to local reporters. The railroad would be managed conservatively, they said. Michigan would have no reason to complain. The goal was to make the road profitable for stockholders, not through exactions upon commerce, but by stopping the wasteful cutting of rates on through traffic. Within days, the Vanderbilt touch became evident. Pinkerton detectives were hired. Conductors who had been building fine houses and driving carriages on modest salaries found themselves handed their termination papers. For the next several decades, the Michigan Central thrived under New York Central control. Trains carried passengers and freight between Buffalo and Chicago, with Detroit serving as a crucial junction. The opening of the Detroit-Windsor Rail Tunnel in 1910 changed everything. This engineering marvel, consisting of twin bores beneath the Detroit River, eliminated the need for car ferries and vastly improved operations. But it also created a problem. The existing depot in downtown Detroit, built in 1884 at the corner of 3rd and West Jefferson, simply could not handle the increased traffic. The solution would be audacious. The Michigan Central Railroad would build the tallest train station in the world, a structure so grand it would rival anything in New York or Chicago. The project would cost $2.5 million for the station alone, with the total investment in the station, office building, yards and tunnel reaching $16 million. In today's money, that represents hundreds of millions of dollars poured into a single facility. The architects chosen for this monumental task were no strangers to grand projects. Warren and Wetmore of New York had partnered with Reed and Stem, the designers behind Grand Central Terminal in New York City. Warren and Wetmore brought expertise in hotel design, which explained the elegant appearance of the office tower. Reed and Stem contributed their knowledge of railroad station architecture. The result was a Beaux-Arts masterpiece that would dominate the Detroit skyline. Construction began in May 1910 after permits were secured. The steel framework rose through 1912, a skeleton that would support over 8 million bricks, 125,000 cubic feet of stone, and 7,000 tons of structural steel. The foundation alone contained 20,000 cubic yards of concrete, Workers labored to create a structure with two distinct parts, a 3-story train depot and an 18-story office tower reaching 230 feet into the sky. The building was designed during the City Beautiful movement, an urban planning philosophy inspired by the 1894 World's Fair in Chicago. The movement called for grand public buildings at the end of dramatic vistas, structures that would elevate the human spirit through architectural magnificence. The city of Detroit embraced this vision wholeheartedly. Land was acquired for the depot and for a park in front of it. In August 1915, the city paid $680,000 in condemnation proceedings to secure the property. The park would eventually be named Roosevelt Park in honor of President Theodore Roosevelt, who died in January 1919. Inside, the waiting room resembled of ancient Rome. Vaulted ceilings soared overhead, covered in tiles that created patterns of light and shadow. Bronze chandeliers hung from elaborate medallions. Marble brick created what the Detroit Free Press called a grandeur that would be lasting. The main concourse featured a skylighted passenger ramp leading to the train shed, a massive reinforced concrete and steel structure that could accommodate multiple trains simultaneously. The office tower above the depot was equally impressive. 500 offices were reserved entirely for the railroad industry. Train personnel, passenger auditors, and other workers filled the building, creating a self-contained world of railroad administration high above the trains below. Every detail spoke of permanence and prosperity, from the walnut benches in the waiting room to the intricate stonework on the exterior. But fate had other plans for the grand opening. On December 26, 1913, fire destroyed the old downtown depot. Smoke billowed into the winter sky as flames consumed the building that had served Detroit for nearly 30 years. Within half an hour of confirming the old station was doomed, arrangements were made for trains to start using the new Michigan Central Station immediately. At 5:20 in the evening, the first train departed for Saginaw and Bay City. An hour later, the first arrival steamed in from Chicago. The station that was forced into early service was still unfinished. Wood-timbered falsework supported parts of the reinforced concrete train shed. Construction debris littered areas meant to be polished and pristine. There would never be a formal dedication ceremony, only a belated acknowledgement on January 4, 1914, that the station was now officially open. Detroit Free Press writers marveled at the achievement despite the rushed circumstances, praising the lighting scheme and the quality of materials used throughout. If you're enjoying this journey through time, discovering the forgotten stories of America's great railroad era, make sure to subscribe to our channel. There are countless tales of ambition, triumph, and tragedy waiting to be told, and your support helps us bring these stories to life. The early years of Michigan Central Station coincided with the peak of rail travel in America. During World War I, more than 200 trains left the station each day. Lines of passengers would stretch from the boarding gates all the way to the main entrance. Most arrived by streetcar or interurban service, as the station had been deliberately placed away from downtown to stimulate development in that direction. An ambitious plan to connect the station to the cultural center via a wide boulevard was drawn up but never realized. Still, the location proved popular enough. The station became Detroit's Ellis Island, the entry point for countless immigrants seeking work in the city's booming automobile factories. Families arrived with cardboard suitcases and dreams of prosperity. They stepped off trains into the grand waiting room. Their first impression of America filtered through marble columns and vaulted ceilings. For many, it was the most beautiful building they had ever entered. Celebrity arrivals added glamour to the station's daily bustle. Charlie Chaplin passed through its halls. Thomas Edison, the inventor who had transformed American life, walked its platforms. Henry Ford himself, the man whose assembly line would ultimately doom passenger rail travel, regularly used the station. Presidents came and went. Herbert Hoover, Harry Truman, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt all made stops at Michigan Central Station during their terms in office. During World War II, the station saw some of its heaviest use. Soldiers in uniform crowded the platforms, heading off to training camps or returning home on leave. In September 1942, a group of Hollywood stars arrived as part of a war bond drive. Bob Hope, James Cagney, Groucho Marx, Cary Grant, and others stepped off their train to a hero's welcome. Thousands packed the station to catch a glimpse of their favorite actors. That evening, the stars performed at Olympia Stadium, raising $47 million in war bonds, equivalent to over $700 million in today's dollars. As actress Betty Hutton later reflected, they were fighting for home, for the lovely times that made life worth living. But even during these glory years, the seeds of decline were being planted. The automobile mass-produced in Detroit's factories was already changing how Americans traveled. After World War II, car ownership exploded. Families who once took trains to visit relatives now drove their own vehicles. The construction of the interstate highway system in the 1950s made long-distance car travel faster and more convenient than ever before. Commercial aviation began to capture business travelers who valued speed over the romance of rail. The numbers told a stark story. In 1945, Michigan Central Station served about 4,000 passengers daily. By 1967, that number had dropped to roughly 1,000. The massive waiting room, once filled with the sounds of hurried footsteps and excited conversations, closed on April 1st, 1967. The beautiful walnut benches that had seated generations of travelers were sold off for $25 each, a fraction of their original value. The flower shop shut its doors. Amenities that had once made the station feel like a luxury hotel disappeared one by one. The New York Central Railroad, struggling under the weight of declining passenger revenue, attempted to sell the station in 1956 for $5 million, just one-third of its original construction cost. There were no takers. The building was too large, too expensive to maintain, and in the wrong location for a city increasingly oriented around automobile travel. Passenger lines were cancelled left and right. Routes that had once connected Michigan to the rest of the nation simply vanished from the timetables. In 1968, the New York Central merged with the Pennsylvania Railroad to create Penn Central, a desperate attempt to salvage profitability through consolidation. It failed spectacularly. Penn Central went bankrupt in 1970, one of the largest corporate failures in American history to that point. The federal government stepped in to create Amtrak in 1971, a government-backed corporation that would take over most passenger rail service in the United States. Amtrak inherited Michigan Central Station, but it was a burden rather than an asset. By the late 1970s, fewer than a dozen trains came and went each day. The vast train shed, built to handle hundreds of arrivals and departures, echoed with emptiness. The office tower, once fully occupied by railroad workers, stood largely vacant. Maintenance was deferred. Problems that would have been quickly addressed in earlier decades were allowed to fester. In April 1985, Amtrak announced plans to sell the station or abandon it entirely. The building cost a fortune to heat, to light, to maintain. Amtrak was losing money on every train that used the facility. A buyer was found in a New York-based company called KB Corporation, and the sale was finalized on December 27, 1985, exactly 72 years after the station's rushed opening. Amtrak continued to lease space while searching for smaller, more economical quarters. KB had ambitious plans to convert the station into a retail and office center, securing a federal urban development action grant worth $3.25 million. But progress stalled. The company's financial credibility came under question. Creditors filed lawsuits. The federal grant money was withdrawn due to insufficient progress. The dream of adaptive reuse crumbled before it could begin. On January 5, 1988, the last train departed from Michigan Central Station. It was not a ceremonial occasion. There were no speeches, no celebrations of 75 years of service. The train simply pulled away from the platform, carrying with it the final passengers to use a facility that had once been the pride of Detroit. The next morning, the station stood silent. What happened next would transform Michigan Central Station from a forgotten relic into an international symbol of urban decay. The building was sold again in December 1989 to Mark Longton Jr., a pistol-packing real estate developer who envisioned transforming it into a casino and hotel complex. He even had a name picked out, the Midnight Express, after the train that once pulled out of the station. Longton spent months trying to keep scavengers out of the building, sometimes confronting looters at gunpoint. But Detroit voters wouldn't approve casino gambling until 1996. And by then, Longton had given up. unable to keep paying thousands of dollars monthly in bills for a building generating no revenue. Without security, without power, without heat, the station became prey. Scrap metal thieves stripped away anything of value. Copper pipes vanished. Brass fixtures were torn from walls. The beautiful bronze chandeliers were cut down and hauled away. Windows were smashed systematically, allowing rain and snow to pour inside. Thieves even took the station's iconic clock, a massive timepiece that had kept Detroit on schedule for decades. It would remain missing for years, wrapped in bubble wrap and blue tarp, hidden by someone who couldn't bear to see it destroyed but knew they couldn't return it until circumstances changed. The basement began to flood. Without functioning pumps, water accumulated to depths measured in feet. The structural steel of the train shed began to rust. The beautiful Guastavino tiles that covered the waiting room ceiling fell one by one, shattering on the floor below. By the mid-1990s, the roof had developed holes large enough to see the sky through. Every rainstorm brought more water inside, more damage to a structure that had once seemed built for eternity. Detroit city building inspectors began recommending demolition as early as 1994, but the station had been listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1975, giving it protected status. Demolition wouldn't be simple or cheap. Estimates suggested it would cost between $5 and $10 million to safely bring down the 18-story tower and sprawling depot. The city couldn't afford it. The building's owner wouldn't pay for it. So Michigan Central Station stood in limbo, too expensive to tear down, apparently too expensive to save. In 1996, ownership changed hands again. Manuel Moron, a Canadian businessman who owned the Ambassador Bridge connecting Detroit to Windsor, purchased the station with grand promises. He would restore it as an international trade and customs center, he announced in 2001. The plans were detailed. The investment would be massive. Nothing happened. Years passed. The building continued to deteriorate. The Moron family spent $12 million on basic stabilization, installing windows and an elevator shaft, restoring electricity. But without a comprehensive restoration, these efforts only slowed the decay. They couldn't reverse it, but something unexpected was happening. As Michigan Central Station crumbled, it was also becoming famous. Urban explorers from around the world came to Detroit specifically to see the ruins. They climbed through broken windows, navigated flooded basements, and ascended to the roof to photograph the city from 18 stories up. For many young Detroiters, exploring the station became a rite of passage. Compared by one art student to visiting a museum, the station appeared in films, most notably the post-apocalyptic movie Transformers directed by Michael Bay. Music videos featured its haunting spaces. Eminem filmed scenes for his song Beautiful Among the Debris. The documentary Techno City celebrated Detroit's electronic music scene with the station as a central visual metaphor. Artists painted its ruins. Photographers captured every angle of its decline. The building that civic leaders wanted to forget became the image most associated with Detroit worldwide. Gerald Williams, who went by the nickname Catfish, lived in the abandoned station after losing his job. In a 1998 documentary called Train Station, he explained the strange dynamic that had developed. Kids from the suburbs would come to spray paint graffiti and smash things up because they could get away with it in Detroit's inner city. They couldn't do it in their own neighborhoods without consequences. So they came to Michigan Central Station, made their mark, and went home convinced that Detroit was a hopeless mess. Meanwhile, people like Williams, who had nowhere else to go, tried to survive in the ruins. The graffiti itself became art. Layer upon layer of spray paint covered walls that had once been pristine. Some pieces showed real talent, elaborate murals that stretched across entire rooms. Others were simple tags, declarations that someone had been there, had seen the ruins, and wanted to leave evidence of their passage. Every flat surface bore marks. Every room told stories in paint and broken glass. By 2009, the situation had become critical. The Detroit City Council, frustrated by decades of false promises and continued deterioration, ordered demolition of the heavily deteriorated building. The Moron family fought back. A lawsuit was filed citing the National Historic Preservation Act. The station was saved from the wrecking ball, but its future remained uncertain. Various proposals came and went. The building could become police headquarters, some suggested. Others proposed moving Department of Homeland Security offices there. None of these ideas advanced beyond conversation. Then, in March 2018, rumors began circulating. The Ford Motor Company was in talks to buy Michigan Central Station. Most dismissed it as another false hope. Ford denied the reports. But on June 11, 2018, the Moran family confirmed what had seemed impossible. Ford had purchased the station for $90 million. Bill Ford, executive chairman of the company his great-grandfather had founded, stood in what he called one of the world's most glorious drug dens and explained his vision. Michigan Central Station would become the anchor of a 30-acre campus focused on developing electric vehicles and autonomous driving technology. It would be a place where startups and established companies could collaborate on solving mobility challenges. Most importantly, it would prove to the world that Detroit was not yesterday's Rust Belt news, but a city of the future. The scale of the challenge was staggering. The basement contained millions of gallons of water that had to be pumped out. The roof had nearly collapsed and needed complete reconstruction. Most of the 29,000 ceiling tiles had fallen and shattered. The steel support structure had rusted extensively. Anything of value had been stolen long ago, from light fixtures to doorknobs. Even architectural details carved into stone had been chipped away by souvenir hunters. Ford hired Quinn Evans Architects, a Detroit firm specializing in historic preservation. They began by sorting through thousands of historical photographs and architectural drawings, trying to understand what the building had originally looked like. Every detail mattered: the pattern of the floor tiles, the exact placement of medallions on the ceiling, the profile of carved stone capitals atop columns. 3D scanning technology was used to create digital models of surviving architectural elements. These scans were then used to 3D print molds for recreating destroyed features. A single capital column required 428 hours of hand carving from a 21,000-pound limestone block. The limestone came from a quarry in Indiana that had been closed for decades, but was reopened specifically for this project because it was the original source. The 29,000 Guastavino tiles that had once covered the waiting room ceiling were nearly all originals, carefully restored and reinstalled one by one. Designers studied photographs of the original bronze chandeliers and cast massive replacements using modern techniques. Every window in the 18-story tower, thousands of panes of glass, had to be replaced. Modern safety codes required updates to electrical systems, plumbing, and fire suppression while maintaining historical appearance. More than 3,000 tradespeople dedicated 1.7 million combined hours to the restoration. The work was supposed to finish in 2022, but was delayed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Ford's total investment exceeded $950 million when the surrounding campus buildings were included. The Michigan Central Station alone accounted for over $740 million, making it one of the most expensive historic preservation projects in American history. Throughout the restoration, Ford made a controversial decision. They preserved some elements of the building's years of abandonment. A wall of particularly artistic graffiti was left intact, protected behind plexiglass. The intent was to honor every era of the station's history, not just its glory days. Critics questioned whether ruins should be commemorated. Supporters argued that the decades of decay were as much a part of Detroit's story as the decades of prosperity. On June 6, 2024, Michigan Central Station reopened to the public. Tickets for the free grand opening concert sold out within 5 minutes. Diana Ross, Big Sean, Jack White, and Eminem performed in Roosevelt Park in front of the restored station. Eminem's performance, backed by the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, brought the celebration to a close. For one night, the park filled with the sounds of music and celebration instead of decay and silence. The restored station stands today as something unprecedented in American architecture. Never before had a structure of this size and significance been allowed to deteriorate so completely and then been brought back to its original splendor. The project required advanced construction technology, historical vision, and financial resources that would have been unimaginable even a decade earlier. A stonemason interviewed during the restoration said it was the most challenging and rewarding work of his career, recreating elements that had been considered lost forever. The station now serves as the centerpiece of the Michigan Central campus. The adjacent former Detroit Public Schools book depository, designed by legendary architect Albert Kahn and opened in 1936, has been transformed into New Lab at Michigan Central. The building houses startups and established companies working on mobility innovation. The Bagley Mobility Hub provides parking and amenities. The factory, once home to hosiery and knitting mills, now serves as the base for Ford Pro. Joshua Seirfman, CEO of Michigan Central, describes the station as a signal to the world that Detroit is leading the way again. It's not just about revitalization stories, he insists. The city is in a position of leadership, driving innovation in mobility technology and urban development. Whether that vision materializes remains to be seen, but the physical transformation of the building itself is undeniable. For Detroiters who remember the station in its operating days, the restoration represents an emotional homecoming. Mayor Mike Duggan, who took office in early 2014, shortly after Detroit filed for the largest municipal bankruptcy in American history, says saving the building was one of his highest goals. The station had become a symbol of decay. Transforming it into a symbol of rebirth carried psychological weight, far beyond mere historic preservation. For younger generations who knew the station only as ruins, the restoration offers a glimpse of what their grandparents experienced. The waiting room's vaulted ceiling, properly lit for the first time in decades, creates the sense of sacred space that the original architects intended. The ticket lobby, with its restored clock keeping time once again, pulses with the rhythm it provided for 75 years of operation. Walking through the restored building, it's almost possible to forget the years of abandonment, almost. The graffiti wall serves as a reminder. Empty window frames in photographs from 2005 now hold glass again, but the images remain as testament to how close the building came to complete destruction. Every restored detail represents a choice to remember, to rebuild, to refuse the easier path of demolition and loss. The story of Michigan Central Station is ultimately a story about American ambition, hubris, and resilience. William Henry Vanderbilt, desperate to prove himself worthy of his father's empire, connected New York to Chicago with a rail network that seemed destined to last forever. Architects created a building so grand, so over-engineered, that it survived decades of abuse that would have destroyed lesser structures. A city that had bet everything on the automobile watched its grandest railroad station crumble, unable or unwilling to save it. And then, in an ironic twist worthy of any great American story, it was an automobile company that finally provided salvation. Ford Motor Company, founded by a man who regularly used the station in its glory days, brought the building back from ruins. The company that had helped make passenger rail travel obsolete now occupies a restored train station as it works to develop the next generation of mobility. If you've stayed with us through this journey from Vanderbilt's railroad empire to Ford's innovation campus, thank you. Stories like this one remind us that buildings are more than just brick and steel. They're repositories of memory, symbols of our highest aspirations and our deepest failures. They can fall into ruin and rise again, reflecting the cities and nations they serve. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more explorations of forgotten places and the stories they hold. Today, Michigan Central Station stands complete once more, its reflection visible in Roosevelt Park's landscaping, just as the city beautiful planners intended over a century ago. The trains are gone, replaced by innovation labs and office spaces. But the spirit of connection, of bringing people together to build something greater than themselves, continues in a different form. From railroad barren to ruin to rebirth, the station has witnessed Detroit's entire arc. And in its restoration, it offers something precious, proof that what seems lost forever can sometimes be reclaimed, that decay is not always destiny, that great buildings and great cities can rise from their own ashes.